Okay, so this past semester I completed my senior capstone. I wanted to choose a topic that wasn't really talked about as in depth as I thought it should be, so I chose Japanese internment. Um, I was encouraged to kind of focus in on something, so I decided to pick John L. DeWitt. So, how he influenced Japanese internment and made decisions for it. Um, and then I was also encouraged not to write my research as a condemnation of John L. DeWitt and focus more on how his decisions reflected the time period that he was living in. So the first thing I looked into was how did he grow up? What did he look like? What did all of that look like? So he grew up in a military family. There's not much that directs towards racism within his family. His dad and his brothers were all a part of the military, but then you start to see the shift in his racial prejudice when he serves time in the Philippines. You kind of start to see where he starts developing this prejudice for Asian Americans and just people of Asian descent. So you kind of see that, and then years later, Pearl Harbor happens, and he recognizes this as something that is going to change America's minds about people of Asian descent, and he acts on it. And he starts talking with different people, and he's placed in charge of the Western Defense Command. And he's working closely with Franklin Roosevelt to make decisions about what we should do. So he has a strong influence in Executive Order 9066, which is going to say that we need to do whatever's necessary to protect America. So the way that they do that is they put Japanese Americans into Japanese internment camps. And we see that John L. DeWitt is kind of very open about how he feels about Japanese Americans and people of Asian descent. Like he's not hiding it at all, but he knows that he can take advantage of that because other people are also feeling that way. They're scared, so they're going to listen to him. They also trust him. He's a very highly regarded guy, so they think, okay, well, this is what he's saying. This is how he's going to protect us. Let's just go with it. I was mentioning earlier, I think the most interesting part of this research was the aftermath that we see. So after he made these decisions, he became kind of highly controversial towards the end of it, and was actually removed from his position on the Western Defense Command when we start to let people out of the internment camps, and they don't have jobs, they don't have housing anymore because they had to leave everything behind. So he starts becoming really, really controversial. But since he was still so highly regarded in the government, he's just moved into a new position, being over a military program at a university. So it just goes to show that in this time period, because everyone was so scared, they don't know what they would have done differently than John DeWitt. So definitely an interesting project to take up, and just kind of put myself into the shoes of what was going on at the time to kind of see where his brain was at, and why he was so influential in doing what he did. So, yeah.
This is our research on the effectiveness of a resource management game and learning about Imperial China. So students play the simulation game and they manage their resources to try and build a lasting dynasty. The main ones that they manage are awe and fear. They're right here. The awe comes from more of like a Confucian idea of morality, and fear comes from more of the Han-Fei legalist point of view, where they wanted to punish people. And you need a balance of both to have a successful dynasty. Students also get labor and resource counters every turn, and they use those to build these structures here: the Great Wall, Altar of Heaven, and Terracotta Warriors. And when those are completed, students get awe and fear counters. Students also respond to events that could happen. I think our example of that was a rebellion that happened, and they can respond to it in a certain way. I think that was based off their fear counters, and they roll dice based on that, and the number of successes they get, which would be a 4 through a 6, would determine how successful they were and if they got a penalty for that or if they got more resources there. Students also review content from the class throughout. So
Very good. So who's got the next part?
So the next part is about the instructional effectiveness based on student assessments from the class. So in the class, it was a pretty overwhelming positive response. It's like 1 through 7, and all of them were in the 6 to 7 range. We saw that they definitely got out of it what Dr. Rausch was trying to teach with it. They showed an understanding of the need to balance fear and awe so that you could have a lasting dynasty, because at the end you do a roll for both, and if you don't have enough of both, your dynasty falls. And then they also showed an understanding of where the awe versus fear came from, so the Confucian versus the Han Fei legalist perspective.
The last thing we focused on when developing our research was trying to determine how we could improve the simulation. So like Eli said before, it was a really well-received simulation, so we just wanted to learn how to make it better. So the main point of this is to enhance the learning and make sure that students are able to review content and understand the content that they're learning. So we decided that we would suggest the improvement of making different grade levels have different complexity of rules. So we have a middle level version, we have a secondary version, and then we have an upper level college version that you could use in the classroom that we could distribute. It would be the same game, you would just change up the complexity of the game. Ultimately, just to help make it easier for teachers not only to run, but also allow their students to review the content and get it all, make sure they understand what they're doing in the classroom.
This was a poster on my paper last semester on Lewis Milestone, and it's about how the social and industry changes at the time ended his career. So I argue that his directorial career came to a decline because of the Red Scare and the industry changes. He started in the silent era, and his most notable movie was All Quiet on the Western Front. It was during World War II that he directed about USSR citizens defending themselves from a Nazi invasion. So after World War II, this was seen as communist propaganda. So he was called before the House Un-Americans House Un-Americans Committee, and to testify. He was declared one of the unfriendly witnesses because he invoked his right to not testify. And his subpoena was eventually canceled, so he didn't end up testifying, but he still went to support his peers. Afterwards, he was graylisted because his name was all over the newspapers as being associated with this. He was also a very creatively independent person, and he wanted his vision, and that was something that was butting heads with the industry, the Hollywood industry, that was wanting a more formulaic approach. And there was more competition from television, and so the production companies could not spend as much money on movies. So he ended up losing his job as a director. And in the 1937, he wrote a magazine by the Communist Party of the United States. And he wrote about how the producer system was getting rid of the director's creative role. And he said that after a director falls, it's basically impossible to come back. It's like he predicted the future of his own career.
So I completed my research on Dr. Benjamin E. Mays and the Black Power movement. So I went through and I found about 10 of his articles that he wrote in the New Pittsburgh Courier. And he wrote a column in that paper for about 40 years to get Dr. Mays' views on the Black Power movement. So Dr. Mays was considered as Dr. Martin Luther. And by the mid to late 1960s, the civil rights movement started to diverge into two directions. So Dr. Mays wrote at length about the Black Power movement, and his primary claim was that it was militant and often violent and he could never stand behind a movement that advocated separatism and that advocated for violence. The main mission that Dr. Mays had throughout his life was actually searching for integration. He always believed in an integrated society, and so any movement that proposed separatism or a different state, he just couldn't get behind that. He met Gandhi in India, and Mays's main focus was on Gandhian principles of nonviolence. So he would write at length about Black Power. My research focused on 1964 to 1973, and he never changed his opinions.
My name is Carrie Scary, and I conform and cover. And this paper was basically about how the U.S. government basically reshaped American citizenship through a combination of fear, surveillance, and a push towards conformity. To be a good American, you had to fall in line and report those who didn't. These policies were to be implemented to root out communism, and betrayal were supposed to benefit the country, but they had negative effects. So this keyhole metaphor right here symbolizes secrecy. And if you look into it, you can see that the Executive Order 9835, the actions of the HUAC in high-profile espionage cases like the Rosenbergs, normalized spying on and reporting one another and turning neighbor against neighbor. Private lives became a matter of national security, and this forced individuals like Lily Hellman and Paul Robinson to choose between their personal lives and their livelihoods. So ultimately, the campaign of truth and psychological conditioning on the duck and cover drills suggested that democracy was absolutely obedient, and these actions taught Americans that strict conformity was the only patriotic path to safety.
All right, so this is my poster about the Battle of Alicia game that Dr. Raff and I have made. He made and we ran it. I put the data together into this poster. The question that was kind of the start of all this is how can we make education more interactive? There's been a big push for it over the years, and while people have tried positing video games, people are trying to get away from more screen time. So I said tabletop game is a nice medium of that. It's an interactive, it's a game, but it gets people off their phones, right? So there's been a whole bunch of games that can be found behind the link here, but this specific one is on the Battle of Alicia between the Gauls led by Vercingetorix and the Romans led by Julius Caesar. And the game is basically the players rolling dice against each other to see who can get more successful results. The Gauls roll six six-sided dice trying to get 5 or more, and the Romans roll 4 10-sided dice trying to get 5 or more. The idea being that there are more Gauls, but they're not as quality a troop as your Roman soldiers, which there were less of, but they were person per person going to be better equipped and better trained. And then they roll off a few times, and then whoever gets the most victory counters and gets the most successful rolls at the end wins. There's some cards that represent things like auspicious omen or bad weather events that can skew the battle one way or the other. And then at the end, they kind of say, okay, did the Romans win like in the real world, or did the Gauls win and change history? And then over here is the student feedback. We've collected student feedback over the 3 years this game has been run. We asked them 3 questions on a scale of 1 to 7. With these are the questions and then the score, asking whether 1 being they did not agree with the statement, or 7 being they did agree with the statement, asking whether they think it was engaging, that the game was educational, it was a good use of class time, or helped them review course content. Additionally, we asked them 4 kind of broad answer questions, which is, did you win or lose, and why do you think you had that result? How were the Romans and Gauls different in terms of the dice they rolled, and what was their difference? What was your least favorite part, if any, of the simulation? What was your favorite part, if any, of the simulation? And did you have any other comments you'd like to add? And then these are just some selected student responses. And generally, we had generally good feedback overall, with an average of about 6.5 in the categories over the 3 years so far we've gotten data from. But Yeah, I think that's it.